Inspector Castillo's floating pleasure palace. How may me help you?
Welcome to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara, week 35.
Hello.
This is episode 168, which originally aired Monday, March 25th, 1985. As Brick moves his things out of the Lockridge mansion, Augusta tries to keep him there by telling him how much she needs him. And I'm not entirely sure she's not flirting with him.
Yes, I was thinking through this scene that we're seeing shades of the old Augusta that we knew and loved back in the summer of 1984 when she was busy seducing Joe Perkins.
Guess she figures she's single now. She tries telling him that people will think it's weird if he's living in a house with 3 women. And he reminds her that's exactly the same situation that he's in Lockridge House. So he moves into the Perkins house, and Amy is looking through his boxes and leafs through one of his high school yearbooks, and also finds a scrapbook of his parents. So we're maybe going to learn a little more about Brick's parents.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Now we know he hasn't seen his father since he was 6 or whatever, but I assume his mom could make an appearance easily enough. The circus comes back into town. Jackie reads a letter from Larry in the tub about all the exhausting missions that he's been sent on. And he's included a photo, and she tells Amy that his eyes in the photo look like the eyes of a man who's not coming back from his mission. So that's kind of a weird thing. I think she thinks he's going to die. Is that what you got from that?
Yes, I think that's perhaps a bit of foreshadowing, and would definitely pave the way to the plot line that you're expecting, involving a love affair perhaps with Ted, who, as we saw last episode, has been rejected yet again by Lincoln.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I probably, would have seen that originally, so maybe I have that in the back of my head if that does happen.
And they're definitely continuing with a more mature look for Ted. He's got quite a full beard now. And we're not seeing quite as much of Ted as the student,
I wonder if they'll wait till after graduation to start that storyline.
Yeah, I'm thinking perhaps they will too. But
it means they have to stretch a little bit because it's only mid-March.
Yes.
Lionel is sleeping on the yacht. So unlike Mason, he actually has a place he can stay. Dave Chang, we see him for the second and final time.
Yeah.
Cartwright. He brings him the puzzle box and the copy he's made. And I was a little bit nervous at the way that they didn't seem to be marked in any way so that they could be told apart. And Lionel's just looking at them. So I found that a bit worrying. Lionel asks him if he managed to get the puzzle box open, and Dave Chang says because of the curse he didn't even bother trying. Lionel visits Augusta. He walks right into the house, and she tells him to ring the bell next time. And otherwise she'll have the locks changed, and Minx agrees with her.
And it was kind of interesting to me, this little exchange, because, again, thinking back to the beginning of the show, we used to see Augusta and Minx sort of prowling around, basically getting in each other's business and sniping at each other. But now we're seeing that for Augusta, that is a preferable arrangement to having Lionel there as well.
Lionel tells her the whole thing is a fantasy in her mind. But I don't think he's going to change her mind just from that.
I don't think that'll work.
That's nothing new, and she's rejected the truth, so. Mason's razor conks out while he's shaving in the presidential suite. Marcello walks in and says he's just using Sophia to get at his father. And then Mason asks Marcello why he followed Sophia around Europe. So he seems a little concerned that Marcello has a different interest in Sophia other than just as a unexpected relative, but he says he was treating her that whole time.
One of the things I liked about this scene was that Mason points out to him that actually he and Marcello both have the same relationship with Sophia, and that they're both her stepson. So I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, I think we knew that, but just seeing them together. And
So they're like step brothers.
Yeah.
Or step brothers by marriage or
Yeah.
something. Or by illegal marriage, I guess. Sophia probably shouldn't have married the Count, or the Count. We don't hear much about the Count.
No.
And Sophia, at one point someone said she'd been institutionalized for 15 years, which was literally, just finished. So she was sneaking out of the institution with Marcello to go on the Orient Express and then getting locked up again, but yet somehow married a Count in between. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot
like
of things we'll have to find out more about, I guess, because it sounds to me like Marcello must have introduced her to the Count.
Yeah, like the feeling I get is Marcello was a doctor at one of these institutions, and that's how he first met her. That's what I'm thinking. And I don't think they said the Countess died or anything, did they? So
I was under the impression he had.
Okay, maybe I've forgotten that.
So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't like initially when we learned their relationship, I assumed she had gotten into a relationship with the Count, and then Marcello kind of came along with that. But it looks like it's the opposite.
Might be true. Yeah.
Plus, we know that Marcello must be adopted or something, because he's got all of these memories of his own parents being killed in the war.
Lionel finds Mason. Marcello kicks Mason out, and then Lionel finds him on the yacht, using his razor. And that was quite a funny scene, actually, between Lionel and Mason.
It was, and it made me kind of think of The Odd Couple. And I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if they ended up sort of
living on the boat
together? That would be kind of fun, but I don't think that is going to happen.
So Mason, of course, is there for his puzzle box, and Lionel opens the drawer, and the two puzzle boxes are there side by side, and he's blocking the view of Mason, obviously, so he can't see there are two. And it's clear that Lionel cannot remember which one is the real one, and he does eeny, meeny, miny, moe, and just gives one to Mason. So, once again, 100-and-something years at the bottom of the sea, and now, due to some easily avoidable issue. Now, at least they should have shown maybe Lionel putting them in the drawer in specific positions, and then maybe showed a wave causing the boat to lurch, and when he reopens the drawer, they're totally not in the same position or something. But this is, obviously avoidable. So, anyway, Mason immediately smashes the puzzle box.
He has a very easy way into the puzzle box. Yeah.
Now, Dave Chang's worried that it might be booby-trapped or with explosives. Makes me think that maybe this is the fake one. Inside, we find a kind of weird-looking chunk of stone. It's kind of shaped like a little, I would say, almost like an old photo frame that size.
It looked to me like a little disc or something.
I thought it was like a chunk of concrete with something maybe chiseled on one side or something.
Yeah.
So Mason looks at it kind of speculatively, like this can be the prize. And he immediately says to Lionel, you gave me a fake puzzle box. So he's, taken the fact that Lionel somehow stalled him for a couple of days and come to the logical conclusion that Lionel had a fake made. So this is, once again, showing how clever Mason is. He talks a lot about how he needs the money from whatever this thing can give him because he has nothing. And Lionel says, well, the box alone was worth $20,000. You could have just sold that. So I would think Lionel would know what he put in the fake box. So Lionel knows whether Mason has the real one or the fake one, but we do not know. So maybe we'll see a soliloquy from Lionel, either very happy that he has the real one or very annoyed that he gave Mason the real one.
It does occur to me that if Mason smashed up the fake box, he really hasn't lost $20,000 because it was a fake box. There was nothing of value in it. So he could end up coming back to Lionel and demanding the real one. Or if he's lucked out and this little object actually polishes up to be an emerald or something of value, then Lionel will be the one sort of left holding the fake box.
Yeah, because Lionel said, oh, how do you know that's not a raw diamond?
Yeah.
Cruz and Eden are in bed together, and the phone rings. And Eden says, Inspector Castillo's floating pleasure palace. And on the other end of the phone is Cruz's mother, whose name is not given in this episode, but it's Carmen Castillo, played by Carmen Zapata. And she comes over and says to Cruz, I hear you're sleeping with Eden Capwell. She works her way up to that, but she finds her slip hidden under that pillow and says, oh, people say you're dating someone, little things. But she really knows already what's going on. And she, veers that conversation into telling Cruz she wants him to settle down. And he says he hasn't given that any kind of a thought. She says, well, Eden is hardly a suitable wife for you. And one of her objections appears to be that she's not Latina. And Carmen says, what kind of children would you have? And he says, little ones at first, I think. So this is interesting. We've got both Cece and Carmen against this marriage, probably somewhat for racist reasons. They meet Eden for lunch, and the first thing Carmen says is, your hair is a lot lighter than I remember. I guess she had met Eden when she was a kid. So Eden's trying to, be polite. Oh, it bleaches in the summer, blah, blah, blah. I keep the top down in my convertible. Oh, I bet you didn't have to pay for that convertible. I bet it was a gift. She says, yeah, what's wrong with that? So, basically, Carmen just snipes at Eden and her lifestyle continually and her background.
Yeah.
She talks about their radically different backgrounds, both, financial and racial, I guess. And eventually Eden's had enough and she stalks out. And Carmen says, well, you need a girl that's nice and stable, not a hot-tempered one like that. So Cruz is not too happy about that. Back at the Capwell Hotel, Eden is showing Cece her restaurant plans, because I guess he's indicated he didn't get a good result from his team. And after she talks him into it a bit, he agrees to lease the space to her to do her restaurant on the roof. And she says Cruz is going to be so excited, and Cece's wondering, what does Cruz have to do with this? She tells him he's, a partner in the venture, and then I guess he decides he wants to delve a little. He says, oh, I remember you two dancing at Kelly's wedding? And she says, oh, we were just having fun. Yeah. So she's downplaying the romantic part of their relationship completely. In the background, we see Marcello going, enjoy your family, Lieutenant Capwell, because soon we're going to change all that.
Very sinister.
Yeah. We just hear a voiceover in his head, and then we zoom in on him, back to the foreground. So Eden tells her designers, that she gets on board very quickly, to just let their imaginations run wild. So this all happens sort of in the lobby area. There's that little table area we saw once when Marcello and Sophia met Augusta, I think. Augusta and someone else early on. So that area is kind of located in the foreground to the right, sort of behind where the camera normally is when it's just shooting the front desk, but then also the elevator bank is sort of behind that. So that's where they do all their design work. It's another one of those almost wicker-looking tables like they have in the atrium at the Capwell House. A bit smaller, I think. So, Marcello tells Eden that he's going to be leaving town soon. Because Cece has ordered him to stop treating Kelly and has told him to leave town.
So that must have happened off camera. I don't remember that.
No. Because the last time we saw Kelly, I think she was
Yeah.
treated by Marcello on that same day.
Yeah.
And I think, Mason witnessed how successful that was. I mean, didn't know it was the revelation of Sophia being alive that did most of it. But so Cruz runs into the hotel. He pulls Eden aside and says, they start talking, and Eden says, "Your mother asked us about getting married." So she's trying to see what Cruz's reaction to that was, and Cruz says, "Well, I haven't thought about it that much." And Eden says, "It wouldn't last 2 days." And then Cruz says, "I think I love you." And Eden says, "I don't want to hear it." And she gets into an elevator. So then Cruz runs up the stairwell to catch up to her elevator and gets on at one of the intermediate floors. And then inside the elevator, Cruz says he loves her and he thinks she feels the same way. And Eden says, "Of course I love you. I've always loved you." And then the elevator opens on a new floor that we haven't seen before. And Eden gets out of the elevator, walking past Cece, who's off to the side, and neither of them see him. And Cruz yells from the elevator, "If you love me, marry me!" To the shock of both Eden and Cece, I think.
Yeah, Cece's got quite a look of surprise on his face.
Yes,
And
so this
then
has
the
come very
theme
quickly.
music
This
comes
has come
up.
up very quickly in the space of, they danced at the wedding, they've been together, but suddenly in one episode, Carmen has managed to push them to a proposal. So
We've seen them form, 2 companies now together?
Yes. The very successful Emerald Finding Company. So, and we've just recently found the missing champagne from our wedding, so maybe we'll hold that back for Cruz and Eden's wedding.
There you go.
It is Brut, as it turns out. So, yeah. I think it's a type. I don't think it's a brand name. I think it's a type of champagne. Because there's a brand name and the word Brut. So.
If it's ours, it's probably cheap.
Well, we got it given to us in the hotel we stayed at in our honeymoon as part of the honeymoon package. So, I'm sure it'll still be good after 18 years. I think, like wine, champagne ages well when you put it in the cupboard over the stove for 18 years. So we have some new sets today. We have we showed Cruz coming out of the stairwell on that one intermediate floor.
Yeah.
And the stairwell's going to come in useful during the May sweeps, so I think they want to introduce that to us. And also, we have that new floor in the Capwell Hotel, which is not the 5th floor, which has previously been shown as the top floor. It almost looks like there's some office space on that floor, and maybe it is on the roof. Maybe that is the access way to the roof, and there's some offices up there or something, because it seems weird that it would be it's only a 5-story hotel, and we know Cruz got on in the lobby and ran up to some floor, so yeah, the elevator has always been shown to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I think 2 basement suites, or maybe it's lobby and basement or something. And we couldn't really see the numbers across the top of the elevator at all in this episode, because I was trying to think, are they going to add an R for roof? Obviously, once you get a restaurant up there, the main elevator has to go there. I thought maybe only the staff elevator goes up there, but it looked like Eden got on the main elevator this time, because there's that elevator bank with, I think, 2 perpendicular elevators. This one obviously doesn't go as high as the 5th floor, because there's just a table there on the 5th floor. This one obviously goes to 5, and then we know that there's a service elevator on the back side of that, which whenever people are coming up to the presidential suite floor, half the time, 2 people who are going up there at the same time, one comes up the main elevator in the foreground, and 50% of the time people end up showing up in the service elevator in the back. I thought maybe that one goes to the roof. I don't know. But they've never shown how people would access that. There's probably some swinging doors back to a staff-only section, but a lot of people like Augusta seem to just waltz in there and use that elevator too. So, so that's that's a new space, and I assume that new upstairs, what I think is that the roof area is going to lead onto some big expansive area that we'll see being worked on in the coming weeks as they build a restaurant.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe showing the shift in storylines a little bit. And if you think about it, we actually saw a couple new sets last week with the tunnel and the staircase to the Lockridge basement, which we hadn't seen before. So, yeah, we've definitely, I would assume based on the sets we've seen the last 2 weeks that perhaps we'll be seeing a bit more action in the tunnel and a bit more action in these new parts of the Capwell Hotel.
The stairway to the Lockridge basement had a similar vibe to the stairway to the basement of the building that Kelly was trapped in during the earthquake. Because there was that first room where Kelly was trapped, and then there was the next room where Sophia was trapped. And it was all dark, and there was obviously debris everywhere, but there's a very narrow staircase that Cruz came down when he went to look for them. And I feel they may have just reused that same bit.
That makes sense.
It seems very, very small. So this was our final appearance of Dave Chang, played by James Hong, who we've seen in many shows. We saw him in Hawaiian Eye, I think, with George Takei. I think they were playing Chinese secret agents, if I'm not mistaken. He played a number of different characters on I Spy, I recall.
Did we see him in Hawaii 5-0? I feel like we've perhaps seen him.
It seems likely that
we
would have. And, of course, he's known for being the Chinese restaurant manager on this classic Seinfeld episode of the Chinese restaurant. So, it was nice to see him. And the first appearance of Carmen Castillo, who we will see on and off for many years. So, that is about it for this episode. So we will see you after we watch episode 169 of Santa Barbara. See you.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy your family, Lieutenant Capwell, because soon we're going to have to change all that.
This week's spotlight is on If Ever You're in My Arms Again, Joe and Kelly's song, sung by Peebo Bryson. It was written by Cynthia Weil, Michael Masser, and Tom Snow. Songs written by Cynthia Weil include Blame It on the Bossa Nova, sung by Edie Gourmet, Here You Come Again, sung by Dolly Parton, Kicks, sung by Paul Revere and the Raiders, Running with the Night, sung by Lionel Richie, You're My Soul and Inspiration, and You've Lost That Lovin' Feeling, sung by the Righteous Brothers. Songs written by Michael Masser include Saving All My Love for You, sung by Whitney Houston, Nothing's Gonna Change My Love for You, sung by George Benson, Tonight I Celebrate My Love, sung by Peebo Bryson and Roberta Flack. Songs written by Tom Snow include He's So Shy, sung by the Pointer Sisters, and Let's Hear It for the Boy, sung by Denise Williams. If Ever You're in My Arms Again was recorded by Peebo Bryson for his album Straight from the Heart. It was released as a single, which reached number 6 on the R&B chart. This was Bryson's first top 10 hit. The song was first heard on Santa Barbara in Episode 1, July 30th, 1984. In Canada, it reached number 1 in the RPM Adult Contemporary charts. In the US, it reached number 1 in the Billboard Hot Adult Contemporary Tracks chart. In the week of July 28, 1984, number 1 on the Billboard R&B charts was Prince's When Doves Cry, and If Ever You're in My Arms Again was at number 11. For the week of August 25, 1984, the number 1 song was Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr., number 2 was When Doves Cry by Prince, number 8 was Caribbean Queen by Billy Ocean, and number 23 was If Ever You're in My Arms Again. In its final week on the charts, Caribbean Queen by Billy Ocean was number 1, and If Ever You're in My Arms Again was at number 38. The song was played on Santa Barbara for the last time on March 1st, 1985, in episode 152, when 2 minutes and 26 seconds of it was played during Kelly and Joe's last scene together.
Yes, as a matter of fact, there was an office on our ground floor that opened up just this morning.
Welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara Week 35.
Hello.
This is episode 169, and we've just watched episode 169 of Santa Barbara, aired March 26th, 1985, Tuesday. Marcello packs up his office as he's been kicked out of the Capwell Hotel. Marcello asks Cece why his anger towards Sophia has been diverted to him. It's not too bad. A call comes in for Cece, so I guess Cece doesn't get a chance to answer, from a Mr. Stanfield Lee. Stan, says Cece into the phone. Stan, says Cece into the phone. You're in luck, an office has just opened up on the ground floor. So, clearly his friend Stan wants to rent Marcello's old office. So we'll be seeing that room 101 in use.
I think we'll be meeting him soon, too.
Well, I was very excited when I heard the name Stanfield Lee, because I remember that character, and I didn't realize he was introduced quite so early. I thought he's associated with another character that we haven't met yet, and I thought the one was introduced before the other. So, so yeah, that'll be exciting, and he's played by an actor that we'll both recognize.
Oh, that's
although
good.
in 1985, I had no idea who he was.
Oh,
so.
Very exciting.
Amy, Brick, and Jackie are playing Brick's records. So they're having a big party with all of Brick's belongings.
With Brick's belongings and no sign of Marissa and Jade in their own house.
Which is a shame. Then we see Dr. Renfro, and he's upgraded Amy's folder. It now has a typed label Amy Perkins instead of scrawled in crayon Amy Perkins. Still seems a little bit empty, but he's on the phone with his mysterious friend, whose name is Jack Stanfield Lee. So somehow, this Amy storyline is now crossing with the Jack Stanfield Lee storyline. And I must say, a couple days ago, when I said I had an idea that Amy's storyline might be related to something else, but I didn't remember. This is the storyline I was thinking of, the Jack Stanfield Lee storyline. So I'm actually kind of surprised because I don't really remember Amy being involved. And I think, it's March, right? So I would have been, still in school, and then early April would have been final exams. Like, I think it's probably quite a few episodes before I actually would have watched an episode and seen Jack Stanfield Lee. So I might not have, remembered because I never saw those scenes visually. And I totally blanked out this Amy storyline utterly. And the Jack Stanfield Lee storyline, I didn't quite remember like the point of it, but it's definitely memorable when we get to it.
Well, that'll be fun.
So, so Dr. Renfro is telling Jack Stanfield Lee that Brick will complicate things for them later on. So this could match with my theory that they want to kidnap the baby after it's born and tell Amy that it died, but if Brick's in the living room, he'll obviously be a witness. So,
and also just having an extra person around who might get suspicious or notice something.
Because probably Amy could be drugged while she's giving birth, and then there'd be a lot of, confusion that they could rely on from that. Amy gets a call from Joshua Friendly saying that they want to interview her for a job. So she's very excited that all these resumes Brick passed out for her are working.
Yeah.
And it's in the newly vacated room 101 at the Capwell Hotel. So Amy says, I don't remember submitting. No, Brick says, I didn't bring any references to the Capwell Hotel. So when she gets there, Mr. Friendly says, oh no, this was passed on to us by someone else that we know that you did fill out an application for. So she buys that. So she has her interview. While she's doing that, Brick and his friend Bobby, who we've never seen before, are listening to the races at Santa Anita on a radio in the lobby. So this is just a little bit of comic relief, I think, because they end up betting $20 on Big Amy. And she comes in first and wins Brick $600.
Ah.
So Joshua Friendly is surreptitiously recording Amy's interview the whole time. And once she's done, he plays it over the phone, presumably to Jack Stanfield Lee. And then Amy, and Brick are in the lobby waiting around to hear. And he comes out and says, "Good news, you got the job, $30,000 a year. And you'll be working for Jack Stanfield Lee, the well-known trial lawyer. He's establishing an office in Santa Barbara."
And that would have been very good money for Amy. I mean, back in 1985, and remember, she doesn't have, really a huge amount of qualifications. I mean, she's basically an administrative assistant or something. So
I mean, didn't Mason just offer Sarah $2,000
Yeah.
a month, which is $2,400 a year? And she thought that was an amazing amount. So,
and she would be a legal secretary, which would be, probably a higher pay bracket.
So maybe Brick will actually start to suspect. What do they do that you're getting $30,000 an hour, a year to be a receptionist? So there might be some suspicion there.
I wondered too if this new character, who I hope we're going to see soon, will cross paths with Mason, or if he has a history with Mason, because
he's a lawyer,
Mason,
yeah.
of course, is also a lawyer. So that's something I'm watching for as well.
Well, it makes sense that he's not in town if he's, establishing an office in Santa Barbara, but we're not sure where he's based, if it's somewhere else in California. I mean, I think it has to be, sensibly, because in the U.S. you have to practice law in the state where you passed your bar, otherwise you have to pass the bar again. So it's actually, kind of silly to try to move to another state and just think you can quickly be a lawyer there. Although Ted said Mason should just move to New York last week. So, but I think TV shows sometimes gloss over that fact. But we'll see. I guess we'll find out where he comes from when he arrives. But now I understand why he's got all these go-betweens now. Dr. Renfro on the line and Joshua Friendly. Joshua Friendly looked kind of familiar. I think he's been active in stuff over the years. So, I'm actually getting kind of interested in the Amy storyline.
Yeah.
I wonder if Marissa will realize $30,000 a year is quite a lot. So, back at the Perkins house, Jackie is painting her toes to the Beatles' Let It Be. So the version that we watched had no sound at all, obviously, to blank out the Beatles song.
Yeah.
We did find another version on YouTube of the same episode and watched that scene again to see if there might be like a Spanish version. And we were shocked that it was actually an English language version. And you could hear the first couple of notes of Let It Be.
Yeah.
And then some other just generic music was played really loudly over the entire scene to block out the Beatles song, which we couldn't hear at all. But of course, the dialogue that Jackie has with the MP who comes to her door was very difficult to hear. So we watched the scene without sound, got the gist of it, watched it again with the volume cranked up, and don't feel that we missed too much, because she goes to the door, and MP hands her a letter. She's very upset by it. And that's pretty much the same with or without sound. So
I think you made the comment while we were watching it that no one cared enough about Jackie to actually try to dub in her dialogue or anything like that.
Well, at first I thought the dialogue was missing because they only had a Russian version and someone was using their old cassette tapes to dub over the audio, and that they had not bothered to record the Jackie scenes. I should track down my tapes and see if there's any of these scenes we've seen that are in French where I actually have the full scene and we could fill in those few gaps. So Ted arrives and she still hasn't opened the letter because she's convinced it's bad news, but Ted talks her into opening it up. And in fact, it's good news. It says that Frank is coming home. So this is not what I expected at all. I mean,
no.
From watching the soundless version of that scene, I thought, oh, that's it, Frank's dead.
Yeah.
So it was actually a nice surprise. Although that means we'll be seeing more of Jackie.
So they decide to go out on the town and celebrate.
Oh, that's right. I totally forgot to write that down.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which I kind of made me feel a bit like this. I think this is, if this storyline is heading where you think it is, I think this is one of those storylines that has maybe become a little bit dated, because I'm not sure you would have a teacher basically asking her student out on a date anymore.
No, it would not be considered a good idea in 2020.
Yeah, and I think this sort of thing became more of an issue and was more in public consciousness probably in the late 80s, early 90s was, when you started to hear cases like Mary Kay Letourneau and some of the cases about teachers taking advantage of students or whatever. So I think this was probably within the last few years that this kind of storyline would have been done.
It seems like when we see shows from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it seems a lot more like taken as a joke, or like people having crushes on their teachers. And stuff like that. Like
the hot for teacher storyline.
Not just the teacher thing, but even the age, right? Like the first episode of The Monkees.
Yeah.
Davy Jones is dating a 14-year-old in the entire episode.
Yeah.
Right? So that's 1970, 68? And I was like, no one thought that was bizarre.
No.
So, yeah, things have drastically changed.
Yeah, whereas the baby stealing timelines and stories are timeless. We've been watching Days of Our Lives.
Yeah, and there's at least one baby's been stolen.
Yeah.
Possibly two.
Yeah.
Well, they were swapped, so they were both stolen. But there's maybe a third baby now. Cruz, if you'll remember, had just shouted across the room asking Eden to marry him. Now, I got really confused as to what floor they were on, because last time I was convinced they were going up in the elevator the whole time. So in this one, the camera had pulled back, and you could actually see they were back on the ground floor. But there seems to be an extra floor now on the elevator button, so I think the roof is there. So the fact is, in the last episode, Cruz ran up the stairs to meet her on one of the upper floors. I can only presume that she then hit the down button and went back down to the lobby. So that's actually where Cece was.
Well, we know that the new restaurant is going to be on the roof. So my assumption was that Eden had gone to the roof or perhaps
because why would she get in the elevator and get back off at the same floor that she just came from?
Yeah.
So it looks like there's 2 basement floors, and then 1 through 5, and then roof now on the indicator above the elevator. So, will you marry me? Echoes across the lobby, and Eden freezes because it's the last thing she expected to hear, and she covers unbelievably poorly by saying, "Will I carry you?" So there's an extremely awkward conversation between them as she talks overly loudly so that people maybe will be tricked into thinking they misheard what they did. So they end up going to the houseboat, and Cruz seems to be naked in bed, and Eden is wearing her outfit, which goes all the way up to her neck, and it's not clear what's going on exactly, but she gets out of bed and starts to get really angry about the whole proposal, that this is totally inappropriate at this point in their relationship, and then she, he had kind of withdrawn it, and she said, well, you only chickened out after you thought I might say yes. So, she then also tells Cruz that Cece has okayed the restaurant, so she doesn't need him anymore. So she kind of wants him out of that partnership. Okay, he seemed to be fine with that, since he didn't know what he could contribute. Then she suggests they go to a film, a French film, and of course that's not really his cup of tea, so they have an argument about that, but he ends up going with her. And they end up arguing throughout the whole movie about which one of them does or doesn't want to marry the other. And people keep shushing them throughout, as you can imagine. This is the same movie theater we saw previously with Peter and Marissa and Jade, I think it was, and Brick, and Amy. And not Jade. So at one point, so many people are shushing them that Cruz just stands up and says, "Hey, do you think this girl should marry me?" And they all shout back, "Yes." And one guy says, "The sooner the better." So they leave, and we see that Marcello was in the back the whole time watching them. So he's been spying on them, I guess, or on Eden, I guess. We know he's kind of obsessed with Eden from before.
And now that he's, I guess, not treating Kelly and is being told to pack up and go away.
So I don't know if he's just going to hide out somewhere.
Yeah.
Follow Eden around?
Maybe with Mason's mother. I mean, apparently she's skulking around Santa Barbara somewhere, too.
That's right. We never did find out what Pamela was up to. So that's another drop storyline along with Russians. And
we never found out who
typed the note.
Who typed the note, or way back, who hit Joe over the head when he had Dominic. Maybe it was Marcello.
So Eden runs down to the beach. It looks like that same area where Ted and the bag lady met a few weeks ago. And Cruz says he put a lot of work to build this relationship, and he needs a commitment from her. So this is, I guess he's decided that is what he wants. And he stalks away, expecting her to mull that over and give him an answer. And she's really upset by the whole thing. She kicks a rock and injures her foot. And Marcello materializes out of nowhere. And instead of taking her to the hospital, he offers to relieve her pain with hypnosis. And I guess she agrees. He does some kind of mumbo-jumbo stuff with, "Oh, the pain is leaving your legs." And she says it's not working. He goes, "Well, maybe I'll try this." And he pulls out his pen light and boom, she's hypnotized instantly. So that was kind of funny.
It was before the Marcello popped up on the beach. I have to say, Cruz and Eden and the actors who played them actually had a very nice scene, sort of trying to work through their relationship. So that was kind of a nice moment. Of course, it ended up with Eden being very frustrated and hurting her foot.
Because Cruz said that he basically initiated everything to make this relationship happen. And I guess he's kind of tired of being the only one.
Yeah.
So, Marcello hypnotizes Eden to steal Cece's Silver Star medal. So he's starting to be nefarious. Now back at the Capwell Hotel, Cece has another visitor. It's Carmen Castillo. And she says, "You probably don't remember me. We met only a couple of times years ago." And Cece says, "You used to work in the kitchen."
I think she's the help.
And then he sees her face and says, "No, that was somewhere else." Or no, that was someone else. So I think he's already put his foot in his mouth. And then she says, "Carmen Castillo, we met at Rosa's." And she mentions she's been living in Arizona. I'm not sure if we knew that, but we do now. They both agree that Cruz and Eden are not right for each other. So this is interesting, having each side against the couple. And then after they all come to an agreement, Cece ends by saying, "Well, I want to make sure that I'm not saying Cruz isn't good enough for Eden." And she says, "Oh, I know. It's Eden that's not good enough for Cruz." So, next thing you see is Cece is offering Carmen a tour of the Capwell mansion. And they run into Eden, who, once they're gone, steals Cece's medal.
So we really know how well Marcello's hypnosis works. We've seen it.
It's instantaneous.
Yeah,
who knows what he's hypnotized Kelly to do?
Yeah. And we really don't know yet the full extent of what he may have convinced Sophia to do.
Well, that's true.
Because she's been under his care for a long time.
We did think that weird memory of Lionel in the mirror was odd. And that is it for this episode. We finally had a version of this episode with the proper credits on it. And at first I thought they were the wrong credits because Joe and Peter are in the credits. But then they list Carmen and several of the other actors who were just in this one episode. So it's actually kind of surprising. So it's too bad that the endings we have are these generic ones from Australia. And this last set seems to have been the Australian ones. Be nice to have the original versions, for research purposes, I guess, because even IMDb lists Joe and Peter's last credit as episode 165, and we're already at 169. So there's something lacking on IMDb too. But then, if no one has these proper credits, it's kind of hard for people to even update that data. Although Lane Davies said to me on the cruise that there is something called official cast lists or something that will have the actual information. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find it online. It's probably the sort of thing you pay for or walk into a repository to look up or something. But that would also help us figure out who played the original Sally Taylor and who played the original Gina's friend Hank Judson.
Hank Judson, yeah. Because
he also has just a question mark on the Santa Barbara Online site, and IMDb doesn't list him at all. So we had 3 actors in this episode that were just one-offs. We had Jesse Lawrence Ferguson as the MP Wilcox. He had a name. I guess they had to make a name tag for him, so they gave him a name. I don't know if it's the same guy we saw last time, because you'd think he would have 2 credits on IMDb if that were the case. So he's the one who brought the letter to Jackie. Bobby, who was Rick's gambling friend.
Who apparently he'll
Martin
never
Gray.
see again.
Yeah, exactly.
Form.
Bobby, have you met Kelly's best friend, Dr. Tony? And then radio voice, Trevor Denman. Now, I don't remember the radio. Oh, probably the racetrack voice. Yeah. I thought maybe it was something else. Yeah, so that is Dr. Renfro, Joshua Friendly. Yeah, those were all the other people credited. So that is it for episode 169. So now I'm kind of excited for the Amy storyline to push ahead.
Well, of course, what I really want to see is, hopefully, in the next episode, Mason getting a bit of information about the remains of his Chinese puzzle box.
And I don't know if we'll be able to tell from Lionel whether he got the right one or not. I guess we'll see.
I imagine we will find out over time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if Lionel doesn't bother opening the other box, we'll know that he knows it's the fake. If we see Lionel puzzling with it, then we'll know that he has the real one. And the emerald might be in there.
Or he may not know.
We will see after we watch episode 170 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
I don't trust you. I don't like you. And I don't want you to kiss anything and make it any better.
And my, how you've changed, Lake and Lockridge. You've become Mrs. Jackie Parks.
Welcome back.
Hello.
This is episode number 170, originally aired Wednesday, March 27th, 1985. Jackie and Ted are out on the town as they drive together. Jackie likens Ted and Lakin's relationship to the Capulets and the Montagues. Now, she seems kind of giddy to be out. I don't know if she's been drinking before they left. Maybe she did say that. That's why he's driving, is that?
Yeah, well, remember, she was getting pretty loaded before he even came because she was worried about what was in the letter.
That's right.
So she's already tied a few on, I think.
And then they end up at the State Street bar. She invites him in for a drink, or to watch her have a drink. I forget what exactly. And Mason runs into them. He tries to get in on the action by dancing with Jackie, but she seems to be more interested in dancing with Ted. And in the background, The Heat Is On is playing on the jukebox. Mason asks Brick to approach the Lockridges with the possibility that he could be the attorney for the Lockridges. Now, this is actually quite an amusing plan, because that would annoy Cece doubly. So I could see that Lionel might contemplate it.
Now, for Mason, that is really scraping the bottom of the barrel. But it's an indication of how desperate he is.
I mean, Brick says, they have lots of lawyers, and And Mason says, I don't mind being one of many. So anyway, it'd be interesting to see if Brick actually mentions this to Lionel, or to Augusta, I guess, because Lionel's not in the house. But I doubt Minx would go for it. Amy and Brick are checking out Jack Stanfield's office, which was left open, I guess. And, they're contemplating whether or not they should be in there, but she says, well, even though I don't start Monday, I am an employee. And the phone rings, so she decides to take a message, and it's from Dr. Renfro, who hasn't recognized her voice. So, of course, Dr. Renfro realizes this is a mistake, Amy realizing that there's a connection. Brick is suspicious right away. He actually calls a friend to check into Jack Stanfield Lee's background. But only good news comes back. He's an advisor to the president. So he congratulates Amy on her new lofty position. So I think Brick's maybe suspicions are gone unless something else happens.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Renfro on his end calls someone, possibly Jack or Joshua Friendly or whatever, to say that he didn't know Amy had been hired, and he says he'll make sure that Amy doesn't think there's any connection between him and the lawyer. So he's going to try to cover. Maybe that will make Brick suspicious again.
Yeah. I think somehow Brick, or perhaps even Amy herself, in the course of her administrative duties, will uncover a little bit more about this situation.
A letter arrives from Jeff, and he's enclosed his new lab tests to prove that he's sterile. So Amy thinks he probably wants his $600 back. Brick says, well, let's give it to him. Let's just give him the $600 we won on the horse this afternoon.
Yeah.
So I think that's them trying to get Jeff out of the picture. So I just don't think Jeff's behind this Dr. Renfro thing anymore. That we may be just giving Jeff the brush off.
Well, and I think, too, this reinforces the idea that maybe Jeff is not the father of Amy's baby, and so there's something else going on here, something very mysterious that probably does have to do with this whole new situation Amy finds herself in.
Eden takes Cece's medal, as she was hypnotized to do, but realizes that Cece wouldn't want her to do that. So there's a part of her that has some sense, that's trying to fight against the post-hypnotic suggestion. She ends up hitting her foot on the desk, which I guess reinforces the pain, and since Marcello had told her she was trading the pain for this thing, it's almost like having the pain. Marcello reneged on his agreement, and so she suddenly actually remembers Marcello hypnotizing her. Cece comes in and thinks she's just admiring his medal, and she asks about his silver star for bravery, and he downplays it. He says, well, that just means I was braver 5 minutes longer than the last guy. And then he has this flashback to covering Marcello's mouth in the cellar while his parents are being killed.
And Eden also asks him, why don't you ever talk about those times? Because obviously he had done a lot of things that warranted medals, and he that's not something he wants to talk about. And I think that's actually a pretty common thing with a lot of people who served in wars, is that they don't really want to talk about it afterwards.
He's got about 7 or 8 medals in total in there. I don't know my medals, so I suppose someone who knew could examine them to see what they meant. It could just be something the prop department came up with and they don't have any meaning. So Eden calls Marcello and tells him to come over later. And then Cruz arrives, and she invites him into the tunnels to have sex. And she then remembers Marcello hypnotizing her on the Orient Express. So these things are starting to flood back. She asks Cruz how long it takes for someone to overcome a post-hypnotic suggestion. He says it could be months or years. So then she tells him that Marcello hypnotized her to help with the pain in her foot, and Cruz is a little bit shocked by that.
Yeah.
And she says he wanted to. And Cruz says, I bet he did.
Yeah.
So I think Cruz has already thought that Marcello's interest in Eden is a bit creepy, maybe.
Well, and also I think most people would realize it's probably part of the reason why Eden brings it up, that, hypnotism is not something you just do. And especially someone with the reputation of Marcello, who's supposed to be a renowned psychologist, would know not to just do that, that you have to have a specific environment, and it has to be set up in a certain way. So I can see why it would be quite alarming.
So Eden tells Cruz she just wants to deal with it on her own, and later Marcello arrives, and he's a bit worried Cece might catch him there, but he pulls out his pen light immediately, and she hands over the medal. So he thinks all is well, but I think at this point that Eden is faking it.
Yeah.
And he snaps his fingers. And she says, "Oh, my foot hurts again." And he offers to hypnotize her again, and she says, "Please do." So I think, she's playing with fire there, because she doesn't know if she, even though she knows what he's going to do, I don't know if she knows if she can overcome it, right? So, he pulls out the pen light and hypnotizes her, and, maybe she's fully under, or maybe she's faking the whole thing, it's hard to tell. But he orders her to bring him all of Cece's private files from during his time during World War II. So I think if Eden remembers everything when he brings her out of it, so I assume she's either completely faking, or she's able to remember these things, even if she has a post-hypnotic suggestion. So after he leaves, she reveals that she remembers it all, and says she'll keep playing along to get evidence she can use to get rid of her mother. So that's her main goal in playing along.
Yeah.
I think she's not even worried about why is Marcello doing all this. She's more concerned with how this can help her get rid of her mom. So that's interesting, because she's obviously going to at some point realize that Marcello means harm to CC. So
I think perhaps part of her feeling about that is one of the things she does remember is being hypnotized on the Orient Express, and Sophia being there and giving her permission to Marcello to hypnotize her again. So I think Eden probably feels that her mother is in cahoots with whatever Marcello's doing, and so maybe is beyond redemption anyway.
Yeah, so maybe she thinks this research is just part of some big scheme to get money out of the Capwells. She's not really realizing Marcello has his own separate agenda. But this may lead her to, now she'll probably read through Cece's documents herself to see if she can figure out what Marcello wants with them, and she'll probably end up asking more about from Cece about his time in the war. I don't know if there's going to be enough in those papers for her to figure out Marcello is that little boy. I mean, it's a bit of a leap if you're not really looking for. Well,
and especially since we've been led to believe that Marcello's father is the Count who's married to Sophia,
which is what Eden would assume. So Eden wouldn't have too much of a hint that little boy, if he's mentioned in the papers, is the same one. But maybe then she'll, I don't know, get a suspicion or show them to Cruz finally, because he's an investigator, and maybe they'll investigate the little boy, and then that's how they'll find out that it's Marcello instead of the other way around. So.
It should be, we were wondering if Eden was playing with fire a little bit, and it's true that perhaps she is, but one of the things that we see throughout this scene is every time she and Cruz start to have a romantic moment, she pops out with a question about hypnosis and what its lasting effects are, and Cruz is of the opinion that you don't necessarily have to stay hypnotized, that you can kind of overcome it if it's something so repugnant to your way of thinking or whatever. So I think that's maybe one of the reasons why she feels sort of brave enough to invite him in to hypnotize her, is she feels that,
Because, she did break it because she didn't want to disappoint Cece.
Yeah.
And so since that's the overriding thing of this all these hypnotic attempts, it makes sense that she thinks she can keep overcoming it with that. Well, that is it for this episode. We really squashed down a lot of Ted and Jackie scenes into a few short sentences, because really that was the case. So we will be back after we watch episode 171 of Santa Barbara.
Because you know that old constantly crabby Capwell, well, he wouldn't approve.
Now you can go back to being a married woman.
Welcome back. We finished episode 171 of Santa Barbara, originally aired Thursday, March 28th, 1985. The Santa Barbara Tribune has a front page headline, Sophia Capwell Alive. Now, this is not the Santa Barbara Evening News that we saw a lot during the Carnation Killer era. They must have that must be the morning paper. Ted has stopped to read the paper in front of the Perkins house. He says he's on his his normal jogging route, and he usually stops at the Perkins house as the halfway point. So Jackie spots him out there, just hanging out on her porch, reading the paper, and he manages to talk her into jogging with him. They jog to the beach bar. So I guess that means the Perkins house is halfway between the Capwell mansion and the beach.
Maybe that's why Jade was hanging out there so much earlier.
So Lakin and Warren are there discussing getting their parents back together. Jackie tries to give Ted and Lakin some time alone to try to patch things up, but Lakin spurns all of Ted's attempts to get back together. She says she can't forgive him for what he did to Warren.
Which is interesting, because Warren doesn't seem to care one way or another.
Yeah. So we've had several people throughout this episode reading that same paper. Warren was reading it at the start of his scene. There is an instrumental playing in the background, Careless Whisper. Now, Amy and Brick pick up Ted's discarded paper, and Amy is shocked to see that Sophia is alive. Brick realizes that that's why there was so much commotion going on last week. Later, Amy's reading that the city council is going to drop daycare for preschoolers to make up a budget shortfall, which she's really incensed by. She says the fat cat politicians should be cutting their wages instead. Now, no mention at all that the earthquake may be responsible for their lack of funds, because I know whenever there's too much snow in Vancouver, they run out of money. So I can't imagine that the repairs to city property from the earthquake weren't very expensive. And I think a lot of government things don't have insurance. I think they just self-insure. So Amy decides to write a letter to the editor, and she dictates her fiery letter to Brick. So I guess it's beach season again. It's 2 days in a row I think we've seen the beach bar. So I guess it's March 17th in California. Time to start hanging out at the beach.
But we're no closer to seeing Jade and Danny again.
No, that was too bad. I'm hoping they show up again soon.
Yeah, I do too.
Now that it's summer.
Yeah, I think that would be nice.
A jeweler takes a wedding ring from a bag and hands it to a mysterious woman. Well, an unseen woman. Maybe not mysterious, she has a hand. He says, now you can go back to being a married woman. She puts it on, and it's Maggie Gillis. So I think some of our theories may be accurate then. I had thought maybe she was tending to like a paralyzed husband or something.
Yeah, well, we were speculating that there was some sort of relationship she was hiding, and perhaps marriage was one of them, and it looks like that was probably it.
So she hides her ring when she later meets Warren at the beach bar. And he tells her that everything, is coming together in his life. He's going to have everything he wants. He's kind of implying her, too, because he's going to open up a business. And he wants it to be a surprise, so he takes her to a newspaper, the Santa Barbara Sentinel, where we meet Pop, who's been running the paper for 40 years, and since his wife passed away, he's doesn't want to run it anymore. He's planning to retire. And Warren says, "Oh, my trust fund should just about pay for this." So he writes Pop a check and buys the newspaper.
Yeah.
And Pop says, "I'll call a staff meeting tomorrow so you can meet the staff." Now, of course, we see the place is completely empty. And he says, "It's very small here, so most everyone works from home." So this is going to be a really good budget-conscious casting for background people at the Sentinel that may have a huge staff, but we're never going to see them.
Yeah, and it's very forward-thinking. I mean, we're all working from home right now, too.
So, well, two stories collide. Amy and Brick walk in, and Amy decides she wants her letter published. And Warren looks it over, and Warren agrees. So I think this is going to be, maybe Warren will be one of those crusading newspaper editors who picks a cause and runs with it. That's
I'm sure Warren Lockridge with the newspaper will get under a lot of Capwell skins from time to time if this goes forward. But Brick certainly seems happy to see Warren kind of landing on his feet and doing something. So
yeah, Brick was really excited about Warren's business, and Maggie seemed to be happy for him too. Then Maggie tells Warren that she has an errand to run alone. We weren't expecting to be back to the cemetery again so soon, but the cemetery caretaker has called crews over to look at the biggest headstone, short of a big Capwell headstone, that has just shown up overnight. Someone has paid for a massive new headstone for Peter Flint.
Although it is inscribed to Antonio. Yeah.
It says Antonio Fiorno, and the caretaker says, "Isn't that the real name of that serial killer?" 1956 to 1985. So that would make him 29. So when that blonde male in his mid-20s washed up a few weeks ago, I guess they were cheating mid-20s. But really, I mean, if he was a teacher, or pretending to be a teacher, he should have been like minimal 23 or something. So I think that makes more sense for him to be 29 6 years later.
Yeah,
but he can't have been teaching for long at that school before Kelly and Joe graduated. Yeah,
I think there's a bit of a story behind that too, probably.
So the full headstone says, it has a quote by Lord Byron underneath. "My greatest grief is that I leave nothing that claims a tear."
And his name is very big.
So we didn't even get to see Joe's headstone.
Yeah,
we get to see Peter's original, very poor headstone, and now this new one. So one wonders if he had made arrangements in his will or something. Mason is reading the paper in his car, where he clearly is living now. It has a for sale sign in the window. And a police officer rousts him and says that it's not legal to sleep in your car. And then he recognizes Mason and gives him a pass. He says, "Oh, say hi to the DA." And Mason shouts that he doesn't need his pity. He just needs money. So Mason goes to the State Street Saloon. For a man who has no money, he certainly spends a lot of quarters on that video game he's been playing.
Well, and he obviously didn't save any of his salary when he was actually working at a fairly prestigious job. He seems to have lost everything extremely quickly.
Well, remember, CC somehow froze his bank accounts, which is very weird.
Yeah, I don't know how you could freeze someone's savings. I guess you could affect their credit or something, perhaps. But yeah, that was weird.
So Frank the bartender comes over and points out that Mason's tab is now nearly $100. So I think Mason's been cut off. He's managed to swipe a cup of coffee, but told him he'd put it on the tab. He said, "Well, you don't have a tab anymore." So, Then Mason gets a call from attorney Howard Otis, who we've actually seen twice before, probably around the time Lionel needed a lawyer, I think. And he wants to hand a job off to Mason that he doesn't have time for. He needs someone to administer Peter Flint's will. So Cruz and Mason meet Howard, and he reads Peter's will.
So I think Cruz is called in as well because, of course, Peter had gone on that massive killing spree, and I guess the police are still interested in any potential other evidence that could be dug up in relation to Peter's crimes.
Cruz will have dibs on anything they find before Mason does. So the will is only about a month old. And it says, "To my beloved Kelly Capwell, who is my vision and my goddess, I leave all my money and all my possessions, and the legacy of my love. I make this will in the unlikely event that death finds me before we can marry."
So this shows us again how deluded Peter was at that point.
"If that is the case, I protect Kelly now with a curse on those who would separate us." So it's a full and complete will. It covers money, possessions, and then a curse for your enemies. So of course, they have to legally call Kelly since she's the heir, and she says, just give it all to charity.
Yeah.
Mason's going to get 10% of this, so at least he's hoping to be able to pay off his tab. Mason and Cruz go to Peter's apartment, and Mason is pleased to see Peter has some high-end electronics. He's looking at his VCR, look pretty high-end, and he thinks he can get $400 for the portable television that he has there. So
he's making all sorts of very dark jokes about Peter Flint all the way. The entire time.
Cruz doesn't really have a sense of humor about those.
Yeah.
And then Cruz says he's going to ask Eden what charity Kelly's share of the money should go to. Mason thinks he can get $4,000, of which $400 is his share, and Cruz tells him to have some respect, because he seems to be most concerned about his share. And then Mason says that Peter owes him money. He owes this whole town.
Yeah. And, I mean, Mason has no money, so, I mean, that is where his mind is going to be.
Mason mentions that he heard something about wedding bells between him and Eden. Constantly crabby Capwell wouldn't approve. Look what he did to separate Channing from Santana.
Yeah.
So, Cruz finds a safety deposit box key taped underneath the drawer in the desk. So Peter Flint keeps on giving after death.
I notice he didn't mention it to Mason. He just kind of
No, but I mean, if they have first dibs,
yeah,
you know,
no,
it wouldn't matter. But yeah, he does keep it on the down low while Mason is checking out the cutlery, of which there apparently is none. I guess he's a junk food junkie, said Mason. So Cruz wants to get on with looking at that safe deposit box. He hasn't really searched much, but he thinks this is worth following up immediately. So he leaves and he tells Mason to just stay as long as he likes. And then it suddenly occurs to Mason that Cruz just told him to stay as long as he likes, and he doesn't have a place to stay. So he sits on the couch, then thinks, no, I can't stay here. Gets up, sits back down and goes, well, why not? So now Mason is living in Peter Flint's apartment. Now we know that he had only paid the rent up till, I think it was the end of March, right? So he's going to be out, at 2 weeks at best, I think. So at the bank, Cruz opens up the safe deposit box and finds only a single letter addressed to Channing. So I'm thinking, this is some part of Peter and Channing's history that Peter has kept, perhaps to blackmail Channing or something. The letter is 2 pages, and it starts like this. My darling Channing, the ocean wakes me, and I find myself thinking of you. How long has it been since we were last together? I miss you so much. I thought I knew the boundaries of love. I thought I knew the limits of my emotion. But you have opened up a new life for me. You've given me hope. You've made my life once again worth living. I guess you can tell how much I miss you. I hate it when we're separated for any length of time, Channing. I go mad with jealousy and loneliness, even though I know you love me above all others, as I love you. This love of ours, our secret, which we can't ever share with the world, it is a love that will last forever, through all eternity. Your lover always, Lindsay. So Lindsay knows about Santana, I guess, even though I know you love me above all others. So this is interesting.
And I think it's always useful to keep in mind whenever we hear anything about Channing that he was only 18 when he died. So he's really, just what we know about him, he's already accumulated a lot of mileage for someone that age.
So this was something, I guess, that Peter was going to try to use against Channing in some way, or had found during his investigations. So I guess now Cruz will. We'll see about that. Now Maggie ends up going to Howard Otis, the same attorney, and he says that she'd win her case if it were anywhere but here, or against anyone else. He suggests she goes home and lives her life. Maggie says, "What life? Until this is settled, I don't have a life." And then she stands outside the door and contemplates her wedding ring. So this makes me think that her husband was in some sort of industrial accident, maybe on a Capwell rig, when there was a big fire and explosion a few months ago.
That's what I was thinking too, and I was also thinking that the perfect lawyer to take this case might be one Mason Capwell.
Oh, yes.
Who desperately needs work, and we already know that this lawyer is willing to refer work to him. And for Mason to get a shot at potentially taking on the Capwells in a massive
class action lawsuit.
Yeah,
well, not class action.
would be,
well, maybe there were others injured, but I definitely think it's Cece is going to be the
that
big.
would be a wonderful opportunity for Mason.
There was actually another little thing in the corner of the newspaper about an oil giant that I couldn't read the rest of the article, so I wonder if it's related. So, yeah. So this is Howard Otis's last appearance of 3.
Oh.
So maybe Mason will just say, "Oh, I got a message from Howard Otis that you were looking for a lawyer or something." So Howard Otis was played by Gregory Itzin, who I didn't know at the time, but later he played President Charles Logan on a season of 24.
Oh.
Maybe more than one season. So didn't recognize him actually the first 2 times he was on. It was not until today when I was looking up the actor's name that I saw the name, and then when we watched the episode I realized, oh, yeah, he looked so young, that's why I didn't recognize him. So then we see Mason at the State Street Bar handing out flyers for his upcoming auction. And he offers Frank a good deal on some stereo equipment. No, he does not offer him a good deal. I think he doesn't want so much money as he wants. But he thinks Frank might like some high-end stereo stuff. So Ted ends up buying him lunch and notices the game that Mason's playing. He says that last year he was the master of that video game. And they decide to play against each other. And then when the lunch comes, Ted remembers he has to be somewhere else and stuffs a napkin into Mason's pocket, and it's full of money.
Yeah, I love this scene between Ted and Mason. You know, just kind of being brothers and hanging out a little bit and playing video games. And then, of course, Ted giving Mason some money at the end of it. And by my count, this is the 3rd time now that Ted has given Mason money. So it's kind of interesting that Ted has so much money at his disposal to hand out to Mason.
Now, I remember this scene from 35 years ago, and I remember it only on audio, because I was surprised today by the location of the video machine, because in my head I had a completely different layout for the State Street Bistro, which I'm sure they'll rename it at some point. And I pictured it actually as having this kind of like clay-colored floor tiles, and then just tables everywhere, and then in the far corner near the bathrooms, a bunch of video game machines. And I was always picturing it to the right and the back of the set. So it's actually completely different than I pictured it now that I see it. So.
And actually, I seem to remember years ago when we were in Santa Barbara, you pointing out various restaurants that could be the State Street bar, and none of them looked like the one.
No.
It actually is. So.
Cruz wonders who Lindsay Smith is, and why Peter has possession of her letter.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cut to the graveyard, and a mysterious woman puts a rose on Peter's new headstone. So, is that Lindsay Smith who bought Peter's headstone and has put a rose on it?
And why, since her letter would indicate that it was Channing who she had this relationship with.
But if she was a student at Lyman Prep,
I know.
She may have been dating Peter as well.
Yeah. Maybe Peter told her he was Channing. You never know.
Yeah. So anyway, we
If
suddenly have a
she's not.
very interesting thing of how these people all link together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, we've introduced several new things just in the last couple days. The Sentinel, Lindsay Smith, another new character was introduced a couple days ago. I can't remember who it is now. So, yeah, got a bunch of new things now that we're in mid-March, and we got to start ramping up to the May sweeps. We've got 2 months, so yeah, a whole new cycle of storylines for different people, and just hope they can find something for Jade and Danny to do.
It would be really nice to see them, even if it was just in a short little storyline, just at least one more time before they throw all of their attention completely onto Amy forever.
Yep, we don't even see Marissa. I mean,
No.
We spend so much time at the Perkins rooming house, and we see Brick and Amy and Jackie. We never see Jade and Marissa.
Yeah. Our last, as I think you said, the last main scene we saw with Jade and Danny was when they were shivering away in that car and finally sort of acknowledged their relationship with each other, which was nice, and I guess would be as nice as any way to end, but still, it would be nice to see them once more at least.
Well, we'll see if they show up at the beach when we watch the Friday episode 172 of Santa Barbara. See you then.
Bye-bye.
My greatest grief is that I leave nothing that claims a tear. Lord Byron.
I protect Kelly now with a curse on those who would separate us.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 172 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired Friday, March 29th, 1985. And I think I saw at least the end of this episode, because it was something I remembered. Now, the episode starts where it ended, with a woman putting a rose on Peter's grave, and Cruz comes up behind her and recognizes her. It's Ginger Jones! So you had guessed right.
Yes.
She asks Cruz if he's looking for fugitive ghosts. They have actually quite a funny conversation. And then over at Peter's apartment, several people have started to arrive for Mason's auction. A bunch of girls arrived that I thought at first were Ginger's girls, but I think they were just maybe treasure hunters. It made me wonder, what happened to all those girls Peter used to hang out with?
Yeah.
But they're happy that he lost their number towards the end there.
Yeah, I bet they are.
So several people show up, including Peter's landlady, played by a different actress than the one we remember letting Summer in. And, not Summer. Who was it? It was
Veronica.
in the elevator. Veronica. So the landlady says his last rent check bounced, so she wants $200 plus $8 for the bank fees, and Mason decides it would be better off for him if she just took something worth $200, and she picks a stereo, I guess, or a cassette player, a tape player. Frank arrives, and Mason says, I'll pay you as soon as this auction's over, because I'm getting 10%. And Ginger and Cruz arrive. Mason asks Ginger why she's in town. He has a number of one-liners, including, is it spring training for male prostitutes? So Ginger mentions that she needs a lawyer to help get a friend out of jail. She gives him her card, and he says, no, I'm not interested. Next time we see Mason, he's breaking into Lionel's houseboat. He suspects he's been given a false puzzle box, and he just basically goes to the same bureau that Lionel pulled the box out of, finds a drawer that's locked, jimmies it with a letter opener, and finds the real puzzle box. The next thing we know, he's broken it open, just as he did the first one. Luckily, there was no dynamite or TNT in there.
Yeah, he's not worried about ancient Chinese curses at all.
And it contains a chunk of rock about this big. It looked kind of pale, so I didn't think it was an emerald. So he takes it to a jeweler, Frank Schuster, and says, well, this is a raw diamond. It could be worth $100,000 after it's been cut. And there's a famous diamond cutter who's just in town right now named Rolf Kleinstuck, and he'll probably charge you $15,000 to cut it. So Mason's mulling over where he's going to get $15,000. CC? No. Ginger. So he goes back to Ginger, says he will take the case for $15,000, which is, I don't think that's the whole fee. I think it's partly a loan, too. But she signs over the money, and then he goes to Mr. Kleinstuck with Frank Schuster. Kleinstuck thinks it might be worth $125,000. So Frank Schuster actually says, there's a risk it could, just turn to dust. So I'll buy it off you for $20,000 and take the risk myself. But Mason decides he wants to go all the way. So he says, go ahead and cut it.
And I'm actually thinking that if this goes wrong for him, he could end up working for Ginger quite a bit more to pay off the loan, and because he might end up being the lawyer to go to when you can't get a more legitimate lawyer to take your case.
She did make a joke that he could work for her as one of her boys.
Yes, I loved actually the dialogue between Mason and Ginger. They were very well matched, I thought.
Yep, if you can find this episode online, I would recommend watching it. Hopefully you've watched it before listening to the commentary.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
Warren meets the staff at the Santa Barbara Sentinel. There are 3 people there and another one who's not in today. So, don't know if we'll be seeing those people again. Cruz puts Maggie on the case of finding Lindsay Smith. He had gone as far as to look in the phone book.
Yeah.
So throughout the episode, Maggie, checks the voter registration, checks with City Hall.
She gets a little visit from Warren, who's kind of interested in what she's working on. So it looks like he's already starting to plump his police sources for stories. I have to say, I really love the idea of Warren in this role. He seems to have really slid into it really well.
It's a really good idea for him.
Yeah.
At one point, Eden's over there, and Maggie almost starts talking about Lindsay Smith in front of Eden, and Cruz wants her to be quiet, and obviously doesn't want the Capwell family to overhear this. I think he tells her then it's related to an investigation of a wealthy family whose son was murdered. And she says, it's Channing Capwell, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, anyway, Eden catches wind that he doesn't want her to, talk about it, and later she eavesdrops a bit, and Cruz says, you shouldn't tell anyone about this, and Eden, and Maggie, of course, doesn't want to tell anyone because it's a very lowly job he's given her.
Yeah.
So she says, don't worry, I won't let anyone know. And so it actually sounds worse than what it is in Eden's ears.
Yeah.
So, at the State Street Bistro, they used the name State Street Bistro for the first time today. We have Cruz, Eden, Maggie, Warren, and Marcello all showing up there at various points.
Yeah.
Eden and Cruz are having lunch. Eden tells Cruz that Marcello hypnotized her to steal Cece's files. And Cruz is surprisingly not concerned about this. He's like, oh, maybe he just needs them to help Kelly.
Yeah.
He's like, what? So that was very bizarre.
Yeah.
Considering how suspicious Cruz should be of everything, it's bizarre that he actually takes the opposite turn of thinking that's not weird.
I think, though, if I think about the dialogue, by the end of it, he was starting to sound a little more concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because Eden told him that Cece forbade Marcello from treating Kelly anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Then Maggie foils a robbery at the bistro.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of puts the brakes on Warren and Maggie's lunch as well as Cruz and Eden's lunch, because they have to take in the prisoner. And Marcello slides right into Cruz's seat. And
Yeah.
Marcello tells Eden that no one can be hypnotized to do what they don't want to. And he says, do you think I turn people into slaves of my will? That's a great line, and when he said it, I remembered it. I must have had it recorded all those years ago and played it back, because I always thought that was a cool and weird line to say. Eden asks to see him tonight. Obviously, he thinks it's because he's post-hypnotically suggested to her to steal the files, and that she subconsciously wants to give him the files that night. He starts to stroke her hand, and she lets him do that. And then later, Eden is looking through Cece's files and is wondering why Marcello wants them.
Now, I thought she phrased it kind of oddly, and maybe I'm misremembering, but I think she said something like, I wonder why Marcello wanted me to look through these files, or something like that.
Maybe I misheard it.
I don't know, but there was just something she said in the way she said it that made me think that maybe something that might be going on here is that she's wise to his hypnosis and isn't being hypnotized, and yet, you know, if you think about what Marcello said, he said, well, you can't hypnotize someone who doesn't want to be or whatever. But I think there's a part of Eden that she's just curious to see where this is going. So I was kind of almost wondering if at one level she thinks that she's in control, and another level she's actually kind of still doing what Marcello wants her to do.
Oh, I see. Well, that's interesting.
But I mean, I might have just caught a phrase and read a little too much into it, too.
Well, I would be interested to know if any of Marcello's hypnosis actually is working on her.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we don't know, and she wouldn't know either herself.
That's right.
Warren writes up the story of the robbery and takes a photo of Maggie to go with it, and she seems fine with that. So she's just mind her face in the paper, I guess. Warren asks her a bit more about her private life, and she says there's not really anything to tell.
Yeah.
Then Maggie asks Cruz if she's proved herself, if she can go back on street duty, and he asks if she's ready to go back to that shooting range. She decides to do a really good job on finding Lindsay Smith and ends up coming up with an address. Phones the bistro where Cruz and Eden are just about to resume their dinner plans, and then Frank takes a call for Cruz, and it's Maggie with the address for Lindsay Smith. So Cruz does say that he'll get with Eden later on in the evening. So he shows up at the address and knocks on the door, and a man answers. He says, "I'm looking for Lindsay Smith." And the man says, "I'm Lindsay Smith." Oh my God, Lindsay Smith. So,
I have to admit I didn't see that coming, but of course Lindsay can be a man's name, just as Ashley and Evelyn and Leslie were once men's names as well.
I was just wondering if you would pick up on it, because, during the episode, Cruz put a little extra emphasis on her at one point. I thought, I wonder if he's oversold it. I wonder if Diane Diane picked up on it, but...
No, I didn't see that coming. Now, I've been expecting for a while that there would be, perhaps one or two secrets coming out about Channing, and maybe there'll be some more. I'd sort of thought, maybe he's adopted or something like that. But no, it hadn't occurred to me that he might be gay. Although, when Cruz was originally reading that letter, when he was looking at it in the safety deposit box, it did briefly occur to me that perhaps the letter was between Channing and Peter. Just because of Peter's former vocation as a gigolo, and we've been assuming it's with older females, but it could have been with men as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I think Mason will be happy when he finds out.
Yeah.
This is 1985, remember. I'm sure Cece would not be happy to know this.
No.
And I'm sure Mason would be more than happy to be the one who mentions it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way he took a week to tell Cece that Sophia hadn't been declared dead. This is the sort of thing he'll probably tease Cece with for several days when he finds out.
Yeah, it's worth thinking about how different things were in the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
people like Freddie Mercury, who was still in the closet. I think Elton John was still married to a woman at this point. So, I mean, it was a very different time.
Mm-hmm. This was around the time, I think, that Rock Hudson was on Dynasty.
Yeah.
And was keeping everything a secret.
Yeah.
So, this is exciting. We'll see. I remember Lindsay opening the door, but I didn't remember that it was Cruz that first encounters Lindsay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that'll be an exciting thing to continue on Monday, because we'll find another person who knew Channing, and maybe another piece of the puzzle to Channing's murder will come out of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be a little bit like with Sophia. And of course, in the last episode, we saw Sophia's face in the paper saying she's alive. And so that one's fully out of the bag now. So now it seems like with this secret of Channing's, I think it will be perhaps a similar kind of slow reveal and drip of information, and people learning about it and what the implications of that are.
Mm-hmm. So we had... Peter's Landlady is a one-time appearance. Peter's Landlady number 2. And we will see Frank Schuster and Rolf Kleinstock one more time. So, you're thinking the diamond will fail and he'll owe Ginger money?
I think so. That's my prediction, that he'll find himself having to work for Ginger and maybe having to take on less and less savory work.
It would certainly have contributed to my sense of the entire Amanda Lockridge thing petering out in a very unsatisfying way if the diamond does get smashed, because I know that's the kind of thing as a kid that I just really couldn't stand, when there was this promise of riches that just turned into nothing. So I have a feeling that maybe you're right, just because I remember having a general unhappiness with the whole way the Amanda Lockridge stuff played out. So.
Now, once again, we have to remind viewers, as when we were looking at the cave earlier, you actually weren't a kid when you were watching this.
I was 18, I guess. I think I'm slightly older than Robin Wright. So. All right. That is it for week 35 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We'll see you next week for week 36.
Bye-bye.
Hey, is that what I've been doing? Using my hypnosis to make people do what I want them to make them slaves of my will?